I do work on linguistic phonetics mainly, and a bit of sociolinguistics as well. What a lot of our students, PhD and master students, and many of them are school teachers or university teachers or teachers or trainers, grapple with this whole issue of teaching pronunciation. Yeah? And that's what I'm going to be kind of talking about today. And there'll be three main things that I'll be focusing on. Okay? We'll look at some tensions when it comes to teaching of pronunciation, the whole issue of English pronunciation in particular. And I'll also then share with you some of the research on Malaysian English on pronunciation. And although I'm focusing on Malaysian English, really anyone who's teaching anywhere else can still look at the same principles, i.e. what's the research on your own variety of English. Okay? In this case, we're talking about pronunciation. Okay, so in terms of research, as I said, my focus is on Malaysian English. I'll look at my own work, as that's what I'm more familiar with, but I'll also talk about what others have done on Malaysian English. And I'll say why, as teachers, we kind of need to know about our own variety, right? We also need to know about other varieties, neighboring varieties, and what's been happening with regards to pronunciation. Okay. And the third thing, which we won't go into too much, so if you come here looking for, I want to know how to teach pronunciation, this is not the presentation for you. But what I hope to do is to engage you, to start thinking about what you can do if you know about Malaysian English pronunciation, if you know about current thinking on English pronunciation, what decisions can you make about your own classroom practices? Okay? So, and with all that, coming to the theme of this year's conference, hopefully, okay, you will go out of this presentation, start thinking about how you can actually deal with pronunciation in your classrooms in a more creative way. Yeah? So, now let's look at the Malaysian situation. Okay? Is pronunciation anywhere in the curriculum? Yes, it is. Okay? I pulled out two documents as examples. Okay? And you have the for primary school and secondary school. So let's look at it. Okay, so for primary school, it's very vague, very general. Okay? It says that people should be able to sing action songs and recite jazz chants with correct pronunciation. I'm not sure what that really is. Okay? Rhythm and intonation. That's not very helpful to teachers at all. Okay? And for secondary school, it's almost like looking for more specifics. And all I got was, at secondary school, this is for Form 1. Yeah? Pupils can listen to, discriminate, and pronounce accurately, so correctly then accurately. Okay? Long and short vowels and diphthongs. Okay, I have some issues with long and short vowels, but never mind. This is where there's clear, to me at least, looking at it, there's not been a lot of information coming from the linguistic side to the curriculum development. Okay, and again, not very helpful to teachers at all, because it's rather vague. Okay, so do teachers teach pronunciation in the classroom? Because if you look at the syllabus, you're supposed to, right? You're supposed to do it so that pupils can do all the things that we talked about earlier. Give me a little bit of time to think about it, you know, but yeah. Okay, some of you get it. Hopefully you don't do this. Obviously your students don't have dentures at this age. Some of us might, but you know. Okay. When we talk to teachers, and some work that's been done by Ramesh and his colleagues, and Joanne, ourselves, my students, we basically find that generally teachers will say, number one, I don't have enough time to deal with pronunciation. I have all these other things to do, okay? And it's not really tested in the exam, per se. Okay? So, the other thing they might say, I really want to do it, but I don't know how to do it effectively. You know, I know how to teach, there's a lot of work on how to teach vocabulary, how to teach reading, writing, speaking, but not really pronunciation per se. Some of them will say, I don't have enough knowledge really. What I did at college or at uni isn't really enough, and so I don't know how to apply this. I don't understand what's going on. A lot of them said, actually most of them said, I think pronunciation is very important. And the students said the same thing as well. Okay? But they just didn't have time, they didn't know how to. They also said that most of the time we do teach loud, but we do it during the reading lessons. You know, when students are reading aloud, not correct the pronunciation. Because not accurate, not correct. Okay? Then I asked them, so what's accurate and what's correct? You know? And then they're like, so that's usually the answer. So, and I am glad, but I must say this, that one of the presenters, I think she said Pillai, right? She's actually trying to look at some issues of pronunciation in her classroom with year 1 students, right? And she's trying to do some action research on that, and I think that's great. And see how she can actually improve on her students' pronunciation, a particular aspect of the pronunciation. Okay? Right. So, let's look at, so the first mention really is about knowing that pronunciation is important, knowing that it's in the syllabus, but then not being able to really do it effectively, apart from just correcting the students' pronunciation ad hoc, bye-bye, okay? That's one of the first mentions, okay? The second one, really, probably this is hovering above us and we don't like to really talk about it, is that you have the prescribed model. Most syllabus curriculum will specify certain models or reference model rather that you have to follow, yeah? And then we also have in Malaysia a local variety of English, okay? And if anyone uses the word Malaysia, I will, what should I do? I will shoot my own bed or something violent, okay? So we will not use the word Manglish because it suggests a magnet form of English, right? And really, our English is not a magnet form of English. I'll talk a little bit about why that's so. Right, let's look at the syllabus and what it says. Teachers should use standard British English as a reference and model for teaching the language. It should be used as a reference for studying grammar as well as for pronunciation. Okay, I wouldn't say anything more on that. Okay, I would. Okay, and the same thing appears in Form 1 about standard British English for pronunciation. Okay. I just want you to start thinking about that. So we're not talking about vocabulary or grammar here, we're talking about pronunciation. And I'd like to just point out, this is just one example. There are lots of this out here. I know a lot of you will not agree with me, and we can chat about that and have over coffee perhaps later, because that debate can go on and on. Really, do we need, number one, a native speaker model? Number two, does it have to be British English? Do we ask ourselves why? And keeping in mind that we have our local variety of English, is this even a realistic thing to do? Okay? So let's talk about Malaysian English. Okay? So this thing about proper English. So Malaysian English is not proper English? How many of you think that Malaysian English is not proper English? Edwin says it's going to shoot you if you say that. No, it's me. I didn't really mean it as my bodyguard, by the way. Right. See, Malaysian English is not just one type of English, right? So whenever I ask people, so how many Englishes do you speak? Malaysians in particular, and they're like, one. I said, really? And then you start asking them, but when you teach in class, or when I'm doing this presentation, am I not using a different English from if I then speak to someone that I'm close to outside this room, or even before I leave this room, or if someone calls me on the phone, you can probably tell by the way I'm speaking English who the other person is. What ethnicity, or what my relationship is with that person. Malaysians are very famous for doing this. So really, we generally have more than one variety of English, of Malaysian English. Okay? And we have to look at context. So when we speak, when we write, and now we also talk about this area where we're We are doing online, mobile, and text, or SMS, as Malaysians would say, SMS me, okay? So we do all sorts of things. And we use different varieties of English when we do these things. So, before I focus on the sounds of Malaysian English, again, I just want to emphasize this point that Malaysian English does not equate the colloquial version only, right? What you hear on Malaysian TV in the news, for example, okay, RTM or Bernama TV, that's not the same English we speak with each other informally. That's not the same English we use in meetings. Now, what you hear in the classroom, the learner English, where students, for some of you have come up to me and said, English is a foreign language to my students. I agree, some Malaysian students. For some of them, it's a first language. For some of them, it's a dominant language. For some of them, it is the third, fourth, fifth language that they learn. Sometimes, in most cases, maybe not very well. Okay, because they don't have the environment. Now, you cannot equate, because for those who are proficient and fluent and can actually use a more standard or acrolectal Malaysian English, you can go in and out of your other varieties, right? Colloquial and so on. But learners, they don't have that standard variety in their repertoire. They haven't learned it. So that's another issue. So we should not confuse colloquial Malaysian English, which fluent Malaysian speakers also use, with learner English. Okay? That is something, again, for teachers to think about. Okay? And this happens anywhere where English is spoken, even in so-called native, where English is supposed to be a native language. So if you're a dialect speaker, right, you go to school and you learn standard British English or whatever, American English, if you don't speak it at home, right? And it's the same with Malay as well. You may be a Cantonese dialect speaker or a Northern dialect speaker. You go to school or preschool, primary school, and you learn standard bahasa, like Melayu or Malaysian, right? Okay, so you need to think of it in that sense. Okay, so let me just focus on this animal called Malaysian English, particularly its sounds. Number one, because we are all multilingual, at least bilingual at the very least, okay, you're not going to have us all sounding the same. You walk around this conference, I've been bumping into people in the lift, at lunch, at tea, and you get all sorts of accents. And these are Malaysians, right? Okay? Because we come from different language backgrounds, and we are multi-ethnic. This is my family already. So we have different backgrounds, right? And we have different educational experiences. This is quite one of the unique things about Malaysia, because we have different primary school experiences. We can come from sekolah kebangsaan, we can come from Tamil medium, Chinese medium, now private and international schools as well. We have to add that. And then, so from these different experiences, obviously, this is going to have an impact on the kind of languages that we speak, right? And of course, different age groups. So when we talk about Malaysian English, a lot of sociophonetic research is showing that, like any other country as well, we are hearing differences. So if you hear news broadcasts or radio news from the 80s even, someone like Farida American, and then you hear today's news readers, they will sound completely different. And you cannot say that, because nowadays our pronunciation is very bad. It changes. The Queen's English has changed. I mean the Queen herself. Alright? Studies of her vowels throughout, she does a Christmas broadcast. And so it's available, and people have studied her vowels. Obviously she's become less tense over the years. Okay? You can get that, but never mind. Okay. And of course, in Malaysia also, the different geographical locations. So people from East Malaysia, people who are from the East Coast, will sound different from the other areas. So we also do have geographical differences, which hasn't really been studied. Yeah? But teachers know this, right? If you teach in different schools, you know this instinctively, that happens is because of where you teach. Okay. Now, and as I said earlier, one thing that we all do, Malaysians in particular, we accent switch, we cross. We cross meaning that if I'm speaking to someone from a different ethnic group, if I don't know that language, I will still put on what I think is their accent. And I'm not doing it because I'm looking down on them or I'm being racist, okay? I'm doing that to show solidarity, to say, hey, I want a cheaper price, okay? So, me and you say same. Okay? So we do that. So we do that all the time. We can do that in a split second. We don't even realize that we're doing it. Yeah? Okay? So all these things you need to be aware of as teachers so that you can then think about what you do in the classroom rather than say, oh, this is right, this is wrong, you must only be speaking like a British person. Why should I? Because I'm not British. Right. So let me just take you through some of the research on Malaysian English, okay? And just to start you thinking about it, we'll just focus very quickly on a bit on vowels in particular, a little bit on consonants, and just show you some of the things that are different in terms of how stress placement, intonation, and rhythm. I won't go into too much detail, okay? Okay, let's very quickly look at vowels. Okay, because if you remember what the syllable said, you should focus on. What did the syllable say? So it's a quiz. Yeah, short and long vowels, and that was it, the diphthongs, right? Okay. So if I ask you how many vowels, we're talking about sounds, okay, not letters of the alphabet, how many vowels do you think in English? This is my trick question for my students in mathematics class. Your answer should be, if I say, how many vowels are there in English? Your answer to me should be, not a number, but which English are you talking about? Right? Okay? Because they're different. And vowels are one of the more sort of apparent or perceivable things that's different in the way different accents of English sound. There are other differences, but this is the one that you know, if you go to New Zealand and they ask you to go to the chicken counter, there's a chicken counter in the airport, and really they mean the chicken counter. Would you go there to someone from New Zealand and say, can you pronounce this properly? I don't understand it. Okay? You wouldn't. So why do we do that to our own? We come and say, you didn't pronounce own properly. Own. This is own, not own. So I'm wrong. We're going to ask ourselves, okay, so that you know how many, and then you look at how they sound like, because the same vowel sounds different in, or could sound different, actually they do sound different in different varieties, right? So, and then how are they used? Now this is something we forget, we just look at the sounds individually, but sounds are not like letters on your keyboard. You don't type them out individually. That is not how I speak, right? So when you look at sounds, you have to look at what happens. Because sounds are very, they're like larangs, you know? Right? They depend on where they are in the word, they depend on what sounds are next to them, and you have to understand them as language teachers. It's just like grammar, right? You understand the rules of grammar, vocabulary. It's the same with sounds. You need to understand that, oh, there are only X number of vowels, stop there. No, you got to look at how they sound like. You got to look at how they are used in different positions, okay, of a word, and in different positions, meaning what are the neighboring sounds, okay? So, just an example. Looks complicated, right? But it's not. Okay. I just want to show you Malaysian English vowels. Now these are fluent speakers. Because if you do learner speakers, you will find something a little bit different. But what we found that is common among whether Malaysians are fluent or not, and generally anyone 50 years, even 55 years and below will do this, okay, is if you notice, the sounds at your left-hand corner, the E, and also for the F and the air, notice that they're very close together. Okay? And also the A and the okay? That's because Malaysian speakers collapse these two sounds. So we do not contrast these sounds. Now this is not about long and short. This is not about long and short. This is about quality of vowels. So where British English might have two vowels, we generally have one. So between pit and peat, or bit and beat, it's difficult for me to do because I don't do these things, okay? Bit and beat, we don't have two vowels there, we have one. What we found though, because English also contrasts for length for some of these pairs, fluent speakers tend to try and have a bit of length difference. So you tend to hear it. But with not very fluent speakers, you don't get a quality difference, you don't get a length difference, so essentially they sound like the same thing. Okay? Similarly with the air and the air, and that's something we share with Singapore English as well. We don't have, I patted my pet. Pat my pet every day. For us, it's just I patted my pet every day. And it's the same with caught and caught. We just have caught. I caught a fish. I put the baby to caught. Same thing. Now, most of the times, what do? We know from context what people are talking about, right? Because again, we don't say words like caught. And you'd be crazy if you go around just saying words like that. Okay, so knowing these kind of things, that this kind of thing happens in Malaysian English as a teacher, you can then decide, okay, in Malaysian English, generally we all do it, I do it, okay. I'm not going to say handbag, I'm just going to say handbag. And does that make me wrong? Does that make me sound non-native? I'm sorry, English is my first language, okay, so you may not have the right whatever, but it is my first language. So am I wrong to say handbag? Now in class, you have to make a decision. Do I have to make my students at least know that there is this difference? But I'm going to tell them, look, when you listen, because when they listen to you, they're not going to hear handbag, right? You have to make a decision as to, because you know what the curriculum states, but then you also know the reality. And if you know that fluent speakers, Malaysian speakers, even newsreaders, our research on newsreaders, we found that this is one thing that you will not find them doing. They won't distinguish between pat and pat. If you've heard the advertisement, all the icons here, I notice are York brand. Listen to the advertisement. York icon. York icon. It's not York. It's York. Okay. Now again, you can make decisions like, well, there's an R in there, so what if I make them pronounce the R? And that would help us hear the difference between York and York. Because once you have to pronounce the R, then you do kind of have to at least lengthen the vowel, if nothing else. So these are decisions you can then make. Okay, never mind, I'll make my students say all the R's, not to make them sound American, but to help people hear the vowels more clearly. Okay? Okay, now diphthongs. Right. For diphthongs, again, this is not just happening to Malaysian English, by the way, it's also happening to other Englishes, okay? Because sounds over time, we will tend to simplify them, right? Because it's not that we're lazy, we need to speak really fast, because by the time our brains get the message and for us to say it, it's all going to happen fast. We're going to find shortcuts, right? So, which of these do you think we don't have the so-called British English vowels? Stand. Okay? Yeah. So, poor is a funny thing because even in England you get poor and Malaysians say word. So, for Malaysians generally will insert a word, we break up the diphthong, right? Anything there that you think we don't really have? Okay, it's actually more and more with younger speakers, we're finding the A vowel becoming more of a monophthong. Okay, definitely in East Malaysia, but more we're also finding it in Peninsular Malaysia. Okay, which other one? Yeah, definitely. I'm wearing a coat. Really? Should we get to vote? We don't have that. Americans don't have this either. What do we have instead? We have more of a O or an O. O. Okay. O. Coat. So is that wrong? So you're going to teach your students? No, you have to say coat. Okay. Right. So these are decisions you have to make. You tell your students. Some people say coat, and the rest of the world says coat. Or coat. Okay. Okay. And what about anything else? There's one more there as well. Which one? The air, yeah. So do you say bad, or do you just say okay. So some of these diphthongs are generally pronounced as monophthongs, right? And it's not just us. This is where your awareness of what's happening to other varieties also helps you. Okay? And maybe you don't even need to focus on these because you have to ask yourself also, how important are these? And if you say, oh, you must be intelligible. Intelligible to who? Okay. Another thing, so I'm just going to run through this. Okay. In terms of consonants, one of the things that is going around now is, oh, all the young people are writing. You know, everyone's party, car, park. Okay? I left my car in the car park to go to the party, like yesterday. Okay. Okay. Generally, our research is also showing that some teachers want to do this, a lot of Chinese school teachers, so that it's easier for the students to pronounce as they see. It helps them with the vowel as well, so that's something you might want to think about. We find that rhoticity, pronouncing the R, because Malaysian English generally is not rhotic, but with the younger generation, we're finding it more among those who speak English as a first language, dominant language, urban kids, those in international schools. More so. And surprisingly, those from Chinese schools because of what I just said. So again, a decision to be made by teachers here. Does that make it sound American? No, because we don't do the other things. We don't say, I'm a particle. And we don't say part. No, generally it's just the R that is very prominent. We don't flap, we don't go party or better. Okay? We don't really do that. So maybe Malaysian English will turn rhotic in 10 years, 20 years when the younger generation takes over when we're all gone. And they're the ones who are teaching, they're the ones who are the parents. And it's fine, because sounds change, don't they? There are other features. If you want to talk about Phonetic, Pedagogy at the end of words, Dr. Dila, which is doing research on that. We also have other things with consonants, okay, like whether we aspirate, whether we say things like paper or whether we say paper, okay, and whether we say the one or the one, okay. Do you say I think or I think? So there has been some work on it, so if you want to deal with those things, go find out what's happening. And what's happening with other Englishes as well. Okay? I mean, go listen to how David Beckham says, I think, my mama. No one goes to him and says, you are wrong. Speak proper English. Correct. There are also other things which we don't tend to deal with. The way we use our intonation, right? A lot of people say Malaysian English sounds very like a machine gun, right? And that's because of the way that we don't really use pitch. We don't if you listen to Malaysian news, on the radio in particular, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get what the important, the main, new information is. Because we do not highlight the thing that we want to say. And if you listen to, say, BBC or CNN, you can hear the intonation. If you do an acoustic analysis, you see the pitch changing a lot more. Ours is a little bit less. So we're a bit sedate in that sense. Okay? So that may be difficult for listeners sometimes. So you might want to deal with that in the classroom. If you've got new information, maybe you want to be louder with the new information, maybe you want to raise your voice a little bit or shout it out. So these are things that you're aware of, you can deal with. Or question as well. We tend to use rising for everything. You know? So you have to figure out whether that's important or not. Because in Malaysian English, when we speak colloquially, we don't even use proper question forms. When I say proper, we don't use standard question forms. Eaten already. Want to go up? Got mad? Alright? And we do that when we text as well. So, but of course, when you teach, you can't teach those forms. You can say, okay, this is how we do it when we speak, but now for standard English, this is how we do it. Okay, but there's intonation with it as well. Okay, so I'm not going to go through too much on this. There are other things, as I said, we tend to not also stress, like place lexical stress, so we would say comfortable. Are you comfortable? You're so beautiful. Okay, so we are, and that again adds to that very machine gun kind of rhythm that we have. Okay, right, now, classroom applications. I cannot tell you what to do in your classrooms because all of you have very unique situations, whether you're teaching year 1, form 1, college kids, you know, a language school. You need to ask yourselves how, if I need to find out about if you want to do TH, for example, TH pronunciation. Go find out a little bit about what's happening. And then you make decisions about how to use them. But you also need to understand how English works. So when you talk about vowels, for example, don't just think about how many vowels. You need to also understand that the quality is different, and you need to understand that English has vowel contrast. We contrast in quality, and we contrast in, when I say we don't. There is at least British English, American English, length contrast, but length contrast is actually, even native speakers don't actually use this much. Okay, reason being, length is really dependent on where in the word, how fast you speak. So length is it's becoming less and less apparent in English. Whereas quality is, and Malaysians don't tend to distinguish vowel quality. Okay, so you need to figure out whether this is important and how you can deal with that. So you need to understand English phonology as well. As teachers, as English teachers, just like how we know about grammar rules, you need to know the rules of sounds. Because otherwise, you won't be able to, you'll be making misinformed decisions. So you need to know the rules as well. Aspiration, for example, particular, voiceless stops, only in syllable initial position. Okay? Yeah, we don't go popping on particulars at the end of the word. Pop. Top. Okay? And it's also good to know what's happening with the other varieties as well, because that helps you, again, to see what's important and what may not be important. Okay. And now, once you know these things, then you can decide to make use of these tensions in class. Again, I'm not telling you what to do, because you have to decide. Older kids, you may be able to talk about this. Maybe they want to make a decision. No, I don't want to sound like that. I want to sound like this. And hey, it's up to us. The way we sound is very related to our own identities. Multiple identities, right? Okay. Use technology, because it's out there. A lot of the things are actually free for you to use online. There's a lot of online support. And like Pillai is doing, carry out your little mini research, because that helps you to understand things. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the tensions, and I hope you start thinking and talking about it amongst yourselves. The research, some of the research that's available, there's other work by Fadila, Nayan at UUM, Tan Siew Kwang from UN, Yakni Tai at UPM, Shahidi at UKM. So there are some good work being done on them. And then, pedagogic decision is up to you, really. Whether you know you have to do it, how do you do it? Okay? With that, hopefully, it will lead, as I said, to more creative teaching and learning in the, not just 21st century, I think now. We should be talking about now. We should not be talking just about the future. Okay? So I'm going to end there, and if you want to chat more about this, that's my email, my faculty lovely website. By the way, if you want brochures about our Masters in English Language Studies at UM, I'm Dean, so I have to do this. I've got some brochures if you're interested in the Masters program.